Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here, coming to you with episode 3 of Legends Profile. Of course, our first 2 episodes covered the late, great Dennis Johnson and, of course, Kevin McHale. This week, we're going to cover the Worm. We're going to cover Dennis Rodman in episode 3. The Worm, a player who is probably best known now through his antics to the modern fan through the Last Dance documentary series there, where he went ahead and partied hard and played just as hard, but certainly partied hard. And was a guy who was pretty much a side character throughout the Bulls run of the late 1990s and indeed through most of the 90s itself. But there's no doubt about it, Dennis Rodman, one of the greatest players in NBA history, one of the most unsung players in NBA history, and a guy who pretty much could get it done on the defensive end, could pinch hit occasionally on the offensive end, but generally his defense was a transfer into offense. A real grit and grind and hustle kind of player. A guy that every team dreams of having on their squad. And some could argue that no player played their role better than Dennis Rodman played his role throughout NBA history. So let's get into it. Let's get into episode 3 of Legends Profile. Let's get into Dennis Rodman. As usual, let's look over the career achievements and statistics of Dennis Rodman. He was a 5-time NBA champion, 2-time All-NBA third-team selection, 7-time All-Defensive first-team selection, 1-time All-Defensive second-team selection, 2-time All-Star selection, a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year winner, a 7-time rebounding champion. He finished top 10 in MVP voting just the once. In the regular season, he played 911 games, averaging 31.7 minutes per game. He averaged 7.3 points per game, 13.1 rebounds per game, 1.8 assists per game, 0.7 steals per game, 0.6 blocks per game, on 1.6 turnovers per game. He shot 52.1% from the field, 23.1% from deep, and 58.4% from the free throw line. In the NBA playoffs, he played 169 games, averaging 28.3 minutes per game. He averaged 6.4 points per game, 9.9 rebounds per game, 1.2 assists per game, 0.6 steals per game, 0.6 blocks per game, on 1.5 turnovers per game. He shot 49% from the field, 14.9% from deep, and 54% from the free throw line. In the NBA Finals, he played 33 games, averaging 27.8 minutes per game. He averaged 4.9 points per game, 8.9 rebounds per game, 1.3 assists per game, 0.8 steals per game, 0.4 blocks per game, on 1.3 turnovers per game. He shot 48% from the field, 14.3% from deep, and 56.3% from the free throw line. You can make a case that Dennis Rodman is the most versatile defender, rebounder, and role player of all time. No player may have impacted games with as many deficiencies on the offensive end as Rodman, but the offense he was able to generate out of his defensive play is legendary. There is no question that Rodman was crucial to all 5 championship teams he played on, with almost every star player from those teams, Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Michael Jordan, and Scottie Pippen, singing his praises for the heart, determination, and effort he brought to the floor. He may have developed into one of the most eccentric characters the game has seen, and many modern fans who never saw him play may look back at him as a my-career player from NBA 2K who spent all their VC on tattoos, hair, and outfits. But Rodman was as big a part of the story of the NBA throughout the late 1980s and most of the 1990s as anyone else. When I say that Dennis Rodman is the most versatile defensive player of all time, I don't say it lightly. To look at his steals and blocks per game and career totals, there is nothing eye-catching. How can a man win 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards and make 7 All-Defensive first teams, averaging just over half a steal and half a block a game, with career tallies that are less than the likes of Nikola Jokic for steals and Danny Green for blocks? What you need to look at is the game film and footage of Dennis Rodman during his career. The Worm had no issues guarding Magic Johnson at point guard, Michael Jordan at shooting guard, Larry Bird and James Worthy at small forward, Charles Barkley and Karl Malone at power forward, and David Robinson and Shaquille O'Neal, yes, Shaq, at centre. If there was an assignment that needed to be locked down and contained, Rodman's number was called time and time again. And time again, he answered the call, took up the challenge, and passed with flying colours. When I say that Dennis Rodman is the most versatile rebounder of all time, I don't say it as a joke. In fact, Dennis Rodman may be the greatest rebounder of all time. At 6'7", Rodman averaged 13.1 rebounds a game for his career, averaged double-digit rebounds for a decade, and led the league in rebounds for 7 straight seasons. In the 10 seasons he averaged double-digit rebounds, he averaged 35.6 minutes a game, and in the 7 straight years he led the league in rebounding, he averaged 36.4 minutes per game. This may not sound like a big deal, but considering he averaged 16.4 rebounds a game in that decade span, and 16.7 rebounds a game in that 7-year span, his time on court compared to his production was astounding. To show some perspective on this, let's compare Rodman's best season to Wilt Chamberlain's best season. Wilt's best rebounding season came in 1960-61, where he averaged a staggering 27.2 rebounds per game. Rodman's best rebounding season came in 1991-92, where he averaged a phenomenal 18.7 rebounds per game. Wilt's team, the Philadelphia Warriors, played at a staggering pace of 132.0, whereas the Detroit Pistons with Rodman played at a pace of just 91.6. That's right, a difference of over 40. Wilt played a ridiculous 47.8 minutes per game, compared to Rodman, who still played a respectable 40.3 minutes per game. But that is still a difference of 7.5 minutes a game for Chamberlain. This means that had the Pistons team played at the same pace as the Warriors team, and Rodman the same number of minutes as Chamberlain, Dennis Rodman would be expected to average a staggering 31.9 rebounds a game. For more perspective, Rodman's lowest minutes per game average while leading the league in rebounds was in 1994-95 for San Antonio, where he averaged 16.8 rebounds a game in just 32 minutes a game. Compare this to Wilt, whose lowest minutes per game average while leading the league in rebounding came in 1972 for the Lakers, when he averaged 19.2 rebounds per game in 42.3 minutes a game. The Lakers played at a pace of 116.9, while the Spurs played at a pace of 94.6. That's still a difference of over 22. With all of that in mind, Rodman would be expected to average a ridiculous 27.5 rebounds a game had he played at the same pace with the same number of minutes as Wilt Chamberlain. So when you account for his ability to simply go after the team's best player no matter the situation or position, when you factor in countless hustle efforts like taking a charge or diving for a loose ball, and when you account for the dominance on the glass, you have a man that can be regarded as the greatest role player in NBA history. Because that's what Rodman's job was, to simply play a role. He didn't need to score like Michael Jordan, he didn't need to shoot like Reggie Miller, he didn't need to pass like Magic Johnson, he didn't need to constantly pick the pocket of the opponent like John Stockton, or swat shots like Hakeem Olajuwon. What he needed to do was the dirty work for the team, gain them as many possessions as he could, and allow the rest of the team to function. Rodman is one of very few players in league history that can be slotted into a team and not disrupt the game plan at all. In fact, his unique skill set likely allows it to thrive better, as all the hard-working elements are taken care of. Dennis Rodman's unique NBA career had a unique start and a unique end. Rodman remains the only NBA player ever drafted out of southeastern Oklahoma State University, where at the age of 25 he was taken by the Detroit Pistons in the second round. Rodman was identified early by coach Chuck Daly as a hard-working, energy-filled, team-orientated guy who was just happy to even be in the NBA, let alone playing a major role on a major team. Managing around 15 minutes a game in his rookie season and starting just the one game, Rodman will begin his ascension in the team's rotation the following year, proving that he could provide minimal offensive relief, but at an efficient clip alongside of his hustle, rebounding and defensive prowess. In the 3 straight trips to the NBA Finals for the Pistons between 1988 and 1990, Rodman would be routinely given the task of taking on the likes of Magic Johnson, James Worthy and Clyde Drexler, all with equal amounts of success as Detroit captured back-to-back championships in 1989 and 1990. By 1990, Rodman was regarded as the league's best defensive player, winning the first of his 2 back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards. Such was the pride that Rodman placed in his defensive game that he was overcome with emotion upon accepting his first award. So valued were his contributions to the team that the legendary coach of the Bad Boy Pistons, Chuck Daly, said that the Pistons may have had better players, but they didn't have more valuable players. This wouldn't be the only time a coach heaped praise for Rodman as potentially his team's most valuable player, with Seattle Supersonics coach George Karl remarking that he felt Dennis Rodman won the Bulls 2 of their games in the 1996 NBA Finals. Rodman was also afforded the luxury of praise from the legendary Phil Jackson, who stated that Dennis may have been the best athlete he ever coached. When you consider that he coached Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, and Scottie Pippen, it tells you just how good of a player and athlete that Dennis Rodman was. By the end of his Detroit tenure in 1992-93, Rodman was off to San Antonio, where the Dennis that he became famous for started to show. While the eccentric persona of Rodman is something that the NBA hadn't seen before or since, it failed to impact on his ability on the basketball court. Rodman proved to be a pivotal piece for San Antonio in his 2-year stint, earning 2 All-Defensive honours, 2 rebounding titles, and 1 All-NBA selection. Eventually, the Spurs proved to be too conservative for Rodman, who was eventually traded to the Chicago Bulls for Will Perdue. At the time, it felt that Rodman would enjoy a few games next to Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen before he was out of the league. But by the end of his tenure in Chicago, he had helped the Bulls to 3 straight NBA championships, earned the last of his 7 All-Defensive selections, and collected 3 more rebounding titles. While Dennis needed the Bulls needed Dennis, who were looking for someone to compete inside after Horace Grant departed at the end of the 1993-1994 season. Rodman played 23 games for the Lakers in the lockout year of 1999 and 12 games for the Dallas Mavericks in 1999-2000 before he became too erratic for the franchise to handle. Rodman was out of the league, but not out of the hearts and minds of NBA fans. It is for this reason that his number 10 is retired by Detroit and that he is enshrined in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame.